So Rich and his mom came over when I was roughly 7 or 8 years old. And I remember them bringing us cans and vegetables and all the stuff in it. And they helped us stock our pantry. I realized even being that young, the financial strain that my parents were under. That experience in many ways is what propelled me into the world of finance. As a child, what you feel is maybe if I wasn't such a burden to them, maybe it wouldn't be so challenging financially. My biggest mistake was I pushed people away and I was like, guys, I got it. It's a divorce. No big deal. I've got what I think is a relatively good attorney. I'm just going to figure it out on my own. While inside, I was doing all the things that you just mentioned. Perform at work, trying to be a good dad, trying to be all these things that take energy to be able to just get through the day.
Hey y'all, Josh Tomioni with the Derelict Podcast. Welcome back. We're so glad you're here. Would you do me a favor? It will only take you a couple seconds. Whether you're listening or watching right now, will you head on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button? It really helps us get this message to more and more people that we can help. Greatly appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Hey, you derelicts. Welcome to another episode of the Derelict Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about money and divorce, the two things that everyone wants to talk about at a cocktail party, along with politics, and maybe the reason for the divorce because of politics and money and divorce and everything else. So we have Jamie here with us today. I'm going to introduce him here in a second, but Jamie, thanks so much for being here, man. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So both Jamie and I come from the finance background. We've both been doing finance for a long time, and you might think, well, then why would this guy have another finance guy on? Well, the reason why is because Jamie's been through a divorce. I've been through a divorce. Jamie grew up in a divorced household. His parents got divorced when he was a kid. I'll let him tell more of that story. My parents did not. They were both divorced before they met each other. And then they were married for as long as I've been around. But there's some really interesting things that happen with divorce. And I guess here's what I would say to the people that are listening to this. This episode is for you if a couple things. Number one, I would say you've ever been divorced. Because I don't know about Jamie, and we're going to get into this a little bit in the episode, but I've met a lot of people that have been divorced, even for a long time, that still have, let's just say, several things not taken care of that maybe should have gotten taken care of when they got divorced. So this episode's for you. If you've ever been divorced, I don't care if it was 20 years ago, pay attention. There's going to be some good stuff we're going to talk about today. This episode is for you if you are considering getting divorced. So you could just be in a marriage and it could be falling apart, or maybe you just don't want to admit that it's falling apart, whatever it is. There are so many things that I think Jamie will be able to share with you, that I will as well, that we wish we would have known when we were going through our divorce. 3, if you're in the process of going through a divorce, don't feel like it's too late. There is always time to be able to change things, to be able to update things, and it's a big deal. So pay attention to that. And then number 4, as always, if you're just a derelict like me. What is a derelict? Let's remind everybody in case you haven't seen an episode for a while. So a derelict just means somebody who's disparaged, who's outcast, who is thrown aside. It's used in nautical terms as a broken down ship, a broken down vessel. Oftentimes, if you Google derelict, you're going to see a bunch of homeless people, bums, a word that I guess I'm probably not supposed to use, but people that are derelict, that have not done whatever their duty was. So why would we call this the Derelict Podcast? Because not that we're necessarily these shameful, evil, terrible individuals, but things like divorce make us feel like derelicts. It's amazing that even though we live in a society where more than half of people get divorced, or maybe it's a little less now, but here's the interesting thing about that statistic. It's only less than half because of the fact that people aren't getting married. So if you include long-term partnerships, the number is skyrocketing. Why? Because grass is always greener, or at least some people think. So I'm going to stop talking because I'm blabbing on right now, and I want to introduce Jamie. Man, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited for you to be here and for you to bring your wealth of knowledge when it comes to finances in divorce.
Hey man, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about, let's just start a little bit with your story, and then we'll jump into all those things that we said that we're going to talk about a little bit more. So we don't need to, spend as much time as you want on this, but I want to know So you came from a divorced household, right? So when did your parents get divorced?
My parents divorced when I was probably 7 or 8, somewhere in that range. Yeah, I was relatively young when my parents divorced.
Yeah, I got it. One of my kids was around that age as well when I got divorced several years ago.
Yeah.
What do you remember, out of curiosity? We don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm really curious. What do you remember of them being married? Do you remember a lot?
I don't remember them being married, not much, but I do remember the divorce like it was yesterday.
Really? Why?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing was the financial impact that it had on the family. My dad, worked multiple jobs to keep a roof over our heads, and as did my mother afterwards. And they effectively DIY'd their divorce. They went down to the courthouse themselves, and they did all the paperwork, and they just did that, went through that whole process themselves, which is totally fine. But I don't think either one of them planned for the financial challenges that were going to come with that. When you go
So
from,
you saw that as a kid?
I did. I remember this distinctly, and I can tell you. I can't tell you what I was wearing, but I can tell you that one of my best friends, his name is Richard, or we call him Rich. So Rich and his mom came over when I was roughly 7 or 8 years old, and I remember them bringing us a Dole banana box. Like, remember the banana boxes you see at the grocery store? I grew up in New England, and I don't think Dole's everywhere, but Dole is one of the premier produce suppliers. And I remember they brought this Dole banana box over with a bunch of cans and vegetables and all the stuff in it. And they helped us stock our pantry. And I knew in that instant, I was like, wow, this is heavy. And I realized, even being that young, the financial strain that my parents were under. And I think in many ways, that experience in many ways is what propelled me into the world of finance ultimately. And frankly, why I do the work that I do today.
But what did you feel in that moment?
It's a great question. I felt like, and I'm not going to try to get emotional on this, but as a child, what you feel is, if this, I know this might not be my fault, but if I weren't here, there wouldn't be so much pressure on them, right? It wasn't I've never I'm not suicidal, or never been suicidal, but having that feeling wow, maybe if I wasn't such a burden to them, they wouldn't be feeling this. And of course, they never felt that way. My parents loved me. There's not even a question about that. And there never was. But it's I was very young, and obviously didn't, my brain hadn't matured and been able to absorb that and process that at that time. But I remember distinctly thinking that wow, if I had a way to fix this, or if I wasn't such a burden on them, maybe it wouldn't be so challenging financially. Wow. And I never wanted my kids to ever feel that way.
And then you've been divorced as well, correct?
Correct.
So how old were your kids when you got divorced?
I have 3. So my oldest was, let's say roughly 13 or 14. So we'll call it 13, 10, and 4 or 5 at the time.
Wow. Okay. So I'm curious then, how did that experience impact how you interacted with your kids when you went through yours?
I think what I tried to do most was just to be this steady, pragmatic, and practical, and just very consistent father to them. We may not be living under the same roof, and there's a lot of stuff flying around because, mom unfortunately was very alienating, and there was a lot of dad's going to make us homeless. She actually said that to the kids one time, and I had to combat that by being very wake up in the morning and text them, and text them in the afternoon, and call them, check on them, and be at their, baseball games and events and whatever it was. And just to be this slow, steady, just my North Star was making sure that they didn't have to ever feel that same level of stress that I felt as a kid. And I think if I wasn't perfect, and, I'm sure
obviously none of us are perfect, but that consistency is so critical, right? Because if they see you show up at every single game, and they see you show up at parent-teacher conferences, and they see you show up at all these events, then there's something about, kids are smart, as you know, right? They're smart. They can figure this stuff out. And I know for myself, sometimes I go in these insecure modes of feeling like I need to defend myself against whatever mom's saying. And what I try to remind myself is kids are smart. So if you keep showing up to every single game, and you keep loving on them, and you keep doing what you're doing, they feel that. They know that.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had any more conversation with them, though, than maybe you felt like you were lacking when your parents went through yours?
They were, I think in many ways they were a little more privy to what was going on. than I was. I mean, when you're 13, you're processing things a lot differently than you are at the age of 8.
For sure.
So I think there was some benefit to that. I mean, there was also some negatives to that too, because, my oldest knew a lot more about what's going on, and, maybe she was hearing conversations that she probably shouldn't have been hearing and so on, along the way, which impacted some things. But I don't know, man. The other thing about this is that we have the benefit of technology as parents now. It wasn't like when I was 8, I couldn't text my dad if something was happening. I had to either drive. We lived on the same street for a little bit, not too close for comfort, but there was definitely some distance. But we were on the same road when I was a kid, so I could ride my bike over there if I needed something or wanted to talk to him about something or stay over the night and do that type of thing. But I couldn't text him. Right. And now it's like these kids can get anything they need or want from you and get your attention anytime they need, which I think is a benefit in this day and age, for sure.
Yeah, true. Oh, wow. Interesting. So let's back up then for a second. Mm-hmm. So obviously you go through a divorce, your parents go through a divorce, you go through a divorce. We don't need to get any more of that story. If you want to share, feel free. But I'm curious, you said something earlier that I want to come back to. And you said that part of what led you into even getting into finances and wealth and helping people with money and that sort of thing stemmed from being 7, 8 years old and seeing somebody bring you a bunch of food, which clearly was a very impactful event for you. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we just didn't have any money when I was a kid, and I feel like if you're lacking something, that's the thing that you gravitate towards, maybe that's in some respects, I mean, maybe that was just me, and that's what I always go back to about my experience as a financial planner and working in the world of finance like I have. It's when you're so focused on all my friends had the cool car and the cool clothes and all those things like those, that was impactful when you're a young kid. It wasn't just at 8 years old. It was like going on into, I had my first job at 13, because I bought my own school clothes. And if I wanted comic books or baseball cards or a new bike, I had to pitch in and help and do those things. So when you don't have those resources, it was almost like I kind of just was focused on that. And I wanted to learn about investing and managing money and building businesses and all of those things at a very early age, probably because of that. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know what the underlying, concepts are there, but I feel like personally, that's really what propelled me into the work that I do.
It makes sense to me. For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's really difficult, I've found in my life, to be passionate about something when there's not some sort of lack or some sort of drive of, well, I see that somebody else doesn't have this, or I didn't have this, or this happened, right? I mean, it's you grow up in a good household, whatever the heck that is, one that doesn't have drama. Maybe people are married, maybe they actually get along, and I don't even know where that household is. Do those households exist? I don't know. But if you did grow up in one of those households, then I could see that would be difficult, right? It almost has the reverse effect of like, well, okay, I guess everything will just work out then, which I guess can be positive in some ways.
Yeah. And, I'm also lacking height, but there was nothing I could do about that. So I couldn't make myself taller, so I might as well educate myself and learn how to run businesses and help people with their financial needs.
Yeah, interesting. So then how did that translate into so you are certified as a financial divorce specialist? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I have two specializations. One is I'm a certified financial planner. I've been doing that work for almost 20 years now as a CFP. And then there's also a designation that takes a little more education, and you have to go through a whole testing process and qualification standards, which is, education and experience and so on. So I'm a certified divorce financial analyst, a CDFA. And that's where you kind of meld the two together in many ways with the work we do, which is helping people navigate the decisions they have to make today relative to the divorce, but also being a CFP and having all the experience working with so many people on things like retirement planning and investments and so on. I feel like I'm pretty well positioned to help people think about what their future is going to look like as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I'm a CFP as well, and I have a couple other designations. I do not have the certified divorce one, so that's good for you. I love it. Let's talk about this for a second, because this has definitely been a big piece of my experience and my financial work with people, not only just with clients, but also with men that I coach through divorce and that sort of thing, is that, man, how do I start this? Attorneys are terrible when it comes to numbers. I don't know how else to say that. Yeah. They just don't get it.
Could you say that again a little bit? Could you say that again with a little bit more passion this time?
Attorneys suck at numbers. So here's the deal. I'm not downgrading attorneys. Attorneys are great. They have a wonderful place. I have great attorneys that work for me and that I've used in the past, etc. However, their expertise is not in numbers. It's not in income. It's not in reading tax returns. It's not in understanding how retirement plans work. It's not understanding how taxes work in any of those structures. So I have seen, and I even saw it in my own divorce when everybody was trying to figure out all numbers for me. I was like, you guys aren't even adding this up correctly. Like this is all incorrect. But what have you seen? Let's just bring that up a little bit. In other words, if somebody's listening to this, they're going through a divorce or they're about to go through a divorce, etc. What are kind of the top couple of things for them to pay attention to, especially when it comes to things like calculating how much assets everybody gets? So, and here's the premise for my question, right? You've probably experienced this as well. Everyone just kind of has this idea, like if it's just a split, it's just 50-50. What's so complicated about that? So why don't you answer that question? What's so complicated? Why can't we just split everything 50-50?
I would concur with your earlier comment too. The attorneys, as much as I respect them and the work that they do, I would never want to have their job, but this is not their area of expertise. And it's like, anything else. I could go change my own oil, but I can also go to Jiffy Lube and get it done in 15 minutes. And as opposed to sitting, spending an hour under my car in my driveway, right? So like you want to use the experts in your life to help you, especially with things like divorce. I totally concur with what you're saying. But to answer your question, one of the things that I think that people miss all the time is the impact that taxes play into some of the decisions you're going to have to make. You're absolutely right. I'm in the state of California. We work in all 50 states. Okay, all 50 states. We have cases in all 50 states. And whether it's an equitable property state or community property state like the state of California, most times, not all the times, most times, those assets are going to be split 50-50, right? I mean, what's fair and equitable in Maryland is fair and equitable in Connecticut or whatever. Like it's usually going to be 50-50. I mean, give or take. What I see happen all the time is the uneducated think that a $500,000 401k plan is equivalent to $500,000 in equity in their home. And they go, well, that looks fair. It's super easy. You take that, I'll take this thing, and we'll walk away. 50-50. Not so fast. Because the impact taxes happens all the time.
Yeah. So give an example on that yep. exact example. Because I know exactly where you're going.
Using this example, we have different types of tax, right? If you're taking money out of your 401k plan, you're going to pay ordinary income tax, whatever the state, and plus whatever the state, the federal tax, your state tax, and maybe even a 10% penalty if you're under the age of 59 and a half. Okay. So now that $500,000 that you had sitting in a 401k plan is worth like $350. Okay. But with your house,
or $250 if you're in
California. Or $250 depending on if you're in the state of California, you're getting hosed anyway. So it's easily $250, right? That same $500,000 that's sitting in the home equity in your home. If you were to sell that property the next day after the dust settles on the divorce, you have a $200,000 exclusion for capital gains tax, right? So if you sold it outright, you're going to be able to wipe out half of that. It's not going to be taxed at all. The next $250 is going to be taxed at 15%, assuming you've owned it. You have long-term capital gains that are involved. So your tax liability is going to be significantly lower. And if you time the sale of that property just right, after the dust settles, and you file that final tax return jointly, you're not going to pay any tax. So now you have $500,000 potentially sitting in your bank account from the house you just sold, while your soon-to-be ex-spouse or your ex-spouse has a 401k plan that's only worth $350. That is not equitable. That is
or
not
$250
fair.
or $200
or $250 or whatever it is. Exactly.
Right. I mean, if the taxes, let's just use that for a second. Let's go one step further, right? If the taxes are, let's call it 50% between state, federal, local, which is very true in most of California, especially if you make decent income. If that is 50% plus then you're under 59 and a half, you pay another 10%. 10% of 500,000 is 50,000. Now you're at 200,000. So all of a sudden that $500,000 home equity is being compared to $200,000 in a 401k plan. And from my experience, 80% of the attorneys don't know the difference of what we just said.
No, exactly. And you're not even talking about like if you made some reasonable amount of money during the course of the year, you're paying the excess Medicare tax. And we haven't even talked about closing costs on selling that property, realtor fees, transfer fees, whatever. right? Like home inspections, all the stuff that goes along with selling a property. So you've got to be very, very careful in how you divide assets up. And that's why the one thing that we do, one of our areas of specialization, is providing after-tax valuations of the assets that people own. And we can show them with almost scientifically, here's based on the earnings you've had over the course of the last 3 to 5 years, we know roughly what tax bracket you're going to fall into. So if you decide to take this deal, this is what you're going to be left with. And then also give them opportunities to go, well, maybe it sounds great and they're just going to walk away and go for it. No problem. But at least they have the information.
What blows my mind is that somebody will spend tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions on attorneys. And that is not an exaggeration, but they won't spend a few $1,000s to understand the financial impact.
Yeah.
I mean, it blows my mind that you spend $50, $100, $200, $300,000 on an attorney and they don't give you this financial knowledge. That could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars more. That it's insane to me. Yeah. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Most of our cases are under $5,000 from start to finish. And we might be working with that person for a year or two. I mean, we have cases we started. We have cases we started 2 years ago because, and you know how going through the court process is, man. It's like there's a whole bunch of stuff happening and then it's crickets for 6 months.
Right.
We don't care. We'll just pick up the ball and run with it later. Whereas your attorney is charging you, probably going to be charging you along the way because it's like, well, I have to send an email out to do this. I have to fill this form out. I have to do this on your behalf. Let's contact opposing counsel and do this. It's cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching all the way. And nobody has a problem doing that.
Yeah. So the other thing too, let's just use one other example as well, which you brought up kind of briefly a moment ago. And that is, what if there's also a pretty big disparity of income? Because I've seen this a lot with men or women that are getting divorced, is that one has a much higher income than the other, regardless of who it is. And that's not taken into consideration when we're looking at all these factors as well, because that could be a really big difference. To your point, what if one's in a really low tax bracket, one's in a really high tax bracket? Now, all of a sudden, we're having a conversation where mom is in the low tax bracket and she gets to deduct the kids and she gets to get the credits and she gets to do all of these things for what? That should be offset over here if the guy is in the high income tax bracket with the other things that he's missing out on, right? Yeah. Because otherwise it's a huge disparity. And it could be the other way around as well. I'm not trying to be sexist here, right? It could be the woman earning a bunch of money, the man not earning very much money. It doesn't matter. But if there's a disparity there, that's a huge difference. And I've just noticed in my work, I'm not sure about you, but attorneys, courts, judges, I remember during my divorce, just as an example, I had to explain how to read a tax return to the judge, my attorney, the opposing counsel as well, the opposing attorney as well. After I had already spent 6 figures on my attorney and just about the same on her attorney. Insane to me.
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. And you're exactly right. I mean, like you understanding the nuances of the tax return. But
here's the great thing. It's an easy solution, right, Jamie? I mean, this is what you do all day long. It's not that complicated.
In your example, it's a perfect case study for it, because in that example that you just gave, where maybe mom gets the deductions, she's probably going to get the house, right? Maybe dad's gone off and now he's living in an apartment, just to get himself reestablished and whatnot. He gets none of those other deductions. He doesn't get any tax write-offs whatsoever. So even if you're trying to think through what is the most tax advantageous way of dividing up the assets, when you think about things like support and who's going to keep the property and all these other nuances come into play. Like, do I get to write off the property tax if I'm in an apartment? No. Right. And this happens all the time. And again, it's not to bash the attorneys. I don't try to pretend to be an attorney.
It's not. And I'm not even bashing the attorneys here, but here's another one just to throw out there. And this has changed a little bit over the last couple of years as far as taxes go. But the other thing to consider too is child support versus alimony and how much is going towards each one of those and what the rules are with those. Because you've been married a long time and your kids are still a long ways away from the age of adulthood. There's some advantages, disadvantages to paying more alimony versus child support. And when that ends and how long it goes and all of these things and also the tax deductions that go along with that also. And frankly, I mean, who knows if this will happen or not? Trump is currently having a conversation that in the office, he's going to try to put deductions for the child tax credit on both tax returns, which would seem fair to me, but we'll see if that ever ends up happening. It seems like it is not something that would happen. I don't know why. Maybe it's just my cynical nature thinking that the IRS isn't going to go along with that. Who knows? But in the meantime, it's a lot more complicated, I think, and here's the deal too. Again, we're not blaming attorneys. I'm also not blaming anybody going through a divorce. I mean, you've been through a divorce, man. Like, even if it's a good thing, it is just so stressful and all consuming. It's just hard. How do you think of anything? You're trying not to bash the other person. You're trying to be there present and consistent with your kids, like you're talking about. You're trying to make sure that you can still work because your head is in the cloud somewhere. You're getting probably distracted from other people that you're like, oh, are actually giving you attention now because you feel like a dry well, a desert that's just looking for some water, right? I mean, there's all these different things going on, and you're supposed to be able to keep your attorney in check as well on the numbers that they should be telling you about. It's a lot.
It's almost impossible.
Absolutely.
You're spot on, man. I say this all the time in my own podcast, and I talk about it with clients and in our Facebook groups and everything else. It's like, you have to surround yourself. If you're going through this experience, you've got to create team you. That was the biggest mistake that I made in my own divorce.
So talk about that. So talk about the mistake, and then talk about who's on team you.
My biggest mistake was I had my CFP just like you, and I have all this experience, and I've got all these tools and resources. I've got what I think is a relatively good attorney. I'm just going to figure it out on my own. And I'm in California. I grew up in New England. All of my family's in New England still. I'm basically out here on an island, which is totally fine. But I didn't want them to worry about me from afar, because I know my mother, she still stays up at night worried about me, right? Like, that's just like who she is. I didn't want my dad to have to worry and get himself involved and everything else. I was like, guys, I got it. It's a divorce. No big deal. While inside, I was doing all the things that you just mentioned, trying to perform at work, trying to be a good dad, trying to be, like all these things that take resources and your energy to be able to just get through the day, let alone never mind going through a divorce at the same time. And that was the biggest mistake I made, where I was like, I pushed people away. I kept them at arm's length and just had the John Wayne syndrome thing, right?
I took this class when I was going through my divorce, and the thing that it was a lot of stuff, and I really only remember one thing from the entire class, but it's a really helpful thing. And that was, he was describing what happens in your body, in your brain, and everything else when you're going through a traumatic event. And I'm using that word on purpose. Mm-hmm. A lot of people like to throw around the word trauma, but who's anybody to judge what anybody else's trauma is? We could have a whole conversation about that. But generally speaking, I would say a divorce is probably a pretty traumatic event. Most people don't get married, I think, to end it. I guess not the intention. So what they were saying is, if you think of it like a bucket, right? Like, you have a bucket for your mental well-being, you have a bucket for your emotional well-being, you have a bucket for your spiritual and your physical. So you have these 4 buckets, right? And in a perfect world, you have, let's say, 25% of your energy and everything else in each bucket, right? 4 buckets, just to do simple math. What they were talking about is, they were saying, when you're going through a traumatic event, especially with something like a divorce, what generally tends to happen is, like, you get like 80% in one of those buckets. So let's say it's like 80% in the just the mental exhaustion bucket, right? That leaves 20% for the other 3. So how the hell are you supposed to do that? Mm-hmm. Like, you just don't have capacity. It's not that people aren't strong or that they don't want to. You just literally don't have capacity. So I'm wondering, based on some of the mistakes you made in your divorce, which, by the way, same as me, kind of just, like, I had an attorney and I thought that that's what I needed, and I had a therapist, and I was like, between those 2, it'll be fine. And it wasn't. I definitely wish that I would have had other people on my team. Specifically, who would you say people need on their team when they're going through a divorce?
Yeah, I mean, that's the creating team you, right? And I think for everybody, it's a little bit different. some people would
well, let's just give some specific roles.
Yeah. I mean, I think you need to you need to let your loved ones know what's going on and how you need to, they need to be there for you, right? And how you want to best use them. I think having a good divorce coach sounds like, somebody that you've been able to, it sounds like you've had some experience in that realm, so to speak. There are divorce coaches out there. I had no idea that these people.
Yeah, I mean, I am a divorce coach. I help men go through divorce myself, but I didn't have it. The reason that I became one is because of the fact that I didn't have that going through. And I agree with you. Like, I had a really strong support system. I had some really great friends and family, and friends and family are always well-intentioned. Of course, they're well-meaning because they're your friends and family. They love you. They care about you. They want what's best for you. And almost always are going to give you bad advice. That's just been my experience.
Which is why
from
you
every
need,
and the reason and it's just it has nothing to do with intention. It just has to do with the fact that they're too close. They're just too close. I'll put it this way, Jamie, and I think you'll probably agree with this, right? Both of us are in finance. We know finance really well. Both of us have been in the industry for about the same period of time. I'm coming up on 20 years as well. Yet, every once in a while, or maybe frequently, doesn't it make sense for us to have somebody else look at our finances?
there's a reason why there are financial planners for financial planners.
100%. I don't do my own taxes. I don't do my own bookkeeping. I don't do my own financial plan. Like I have other people come in and assist me with this because of the fact that, and here's the only reason why. It's not because of knowledge. It's not because of experience. It's not because I don't know how to do it. It's proximity.
You're too close to the problem. You're too close to it. So that's where, divorce coaches like you, your loved ones, your therapists, your even, your obviously your attorney is part of that team. Financial folks like us as CDFAs are certainly resources that you can leverage. It's like you have to figure out what's going to work best for you.
For sure.
And figure out who your support system is going to be. Your pastor, your rabbi, whoever, it doesn't matter.
So here's how I just kind of think about it in my brain. So you have the legal team, right? And that could be anything from, obviously you have judges and courts and everything else, but that generally speaking is your attorney and maybe a mediator. A lot of states require you to have a mediator anyway before you go to court or while you're in court, et cetera. Every state is different as far as that goes. So there's the legal team, which is where a lot of people stop. Then I would say there's let's call it the emotional support team, right? So friends and family could be in there for sure. I would encourage everybody listening to this, have friends and family that are actually willing to have tough conversations with you and also be loving and supportive at the same time, because it's not going to do any good. I promise you, it's not going to do any good to have friends and family that are just so team you that they're anti everybody else. Because I definitely went through that. The other people I would say are in that emotional support bucket are therapists, right? People in that nature. And I'm not going to put coaches there, and I'll explain why in a second, because therapist's job is to help you with past trauma. It's to help you with what you have gone through in the past so that you can move forward. But it is not their job to help you in the present moment moving forward. That's not what therapists do. Now, some therapists argue with me on this, and I'm just going to tell you right now, if you're a therapist listening to this, you're wrong. Because that's not what you're designed to do. You are, and I love therapists. I've had a lot of good therapy in my life. I'm not anti-therapy. But therapy is really, hey, I'm stuck with something from the past. Now let me move forward.
Yep.
So that third category are the ones that help you move forward. And that's primarily a coach. That's what I wish I had when I was going through my divorce. And that is what you are on the financial side, right? Is that you need somebody that has a little distance and they've seen it before. And it's like why somebody would come to you as a financial planner to retire, right? That like if all goes according to plan, they'll retire one time. But after you've helped hundreds of thousands of people retire, you start to see patterns and you can help people retire. Whereas if just one person, just like a divorce, I mean, some people obviously go through multiple divorces, but the idea behind a divorce coach is if I've helped hundreds of guys go through divorce, there's patterns and I understand how to help you with that. Hopefully you only have to go through this once, but you're not going to know those patterns.
100%.
And then the fourth that I don't think I mentioned yet is the financial side, right? So that would be you. That would be, I'm curious how often you see people like forensic accountants and other people come in as well, because some of that, especially with complicated business assets and everything else, I'm sure that there's times where you'll bring in a forensic accountant and say, hey, look, we got to evaluate the business. We got to do all these other things as well, because then it gets really complicated.
Yeah, we actually just hired a business valuations person for the team.
Oh, fantastic.
We see that happen day in and day out. So my thought was, let's just hire somebody directly to work with us to do business valuations for us, because we were farming that business out for so very long. And it makes sense to keep it in-house because we have all the information we need to start doing the valuations right away without having to regather all that information. But and forensic accountants are incredibly important. You usually see that when things get a little more complex. A lot of the times we can usually sort that out and try to find the money or follow the money, so to speak, with the information we have. So I don't think people need to go directly to a forensic accountant, but our thought is like, let's give us a crack at it first, and we'll see if we can try to uncover some of this, because it happens all the time. We see so many people
as well
are trying to hide stuff. And dudes, if you're listening and you're going through a divorce and you're trying to get creative and you think you're going to outsmart the financial people, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, But we've seen most of these movies, and it's different actors, but we've seen all the movies, man, and it's not hard to find. It's usually not that hard to find. Even we have one case right now where there's 11 LLCs that own other LLCs simply to try to confuse the IRS and, in this particular case, his soon-to-be ex-spouse, and we're still able to find a bunch of hidden money.
Of course, because you can always track it.
There's a paper trail for everything.
Let's also speak to the other side of that too, because so I just had this experience where I was working with somebody just the other day where the spouse came back and basically is asking for more money. They've been divorced for a few years now. The spouse came back and basically is asking for more money, right? Whether it ends up being child support, alimony, whatever, right? And that spouse is not a business owner. Went to business owner spouse and was like, you're making all this money. You got all this profit. You got all this, all this money just coming out the wazoo. And that's another thing, really. If you're a business owner, also pay attention to this. Goodness sake, please, for the love of God, get some help besides just an attorney. Because again, in general, most attorneys are not business owners. So they don't understand how to be a business owner. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just most attorneys are working for firms as an employee or a contractor, depending on their structure. And most of them are partners, so they have some equity, blah, blah, blah. But they still don't understand business ownership because they're not the CEO. They're not the one running the company. They don't understand how the finances work. All they understand is billable hours. And then from those billable hours, what they get paid in return. They don't understand all the expenses of the business, guaranteed. Even most of the top partners at most of the top law firms, guaranteed if you ask them about how the money works, the bookkeeping, the finances in the firm, they have no idea. Why is that important? It's important because if you're a business owner, you do understand that. You also understand that you could be making $100,000 a year, $1 million a year, $10 million a year, $100 million a year, and bringing home nothing. It doesn't matter, right? That piece does not matter. So please, for the love of God, look at those finances very, very closely and make sure that you have somebody that understands what it's like. Because what's happening right now with this person I just brought up is that the woman's coming back and basically saying, well, there's all this revenue. You should be able to afford it. And literally, this person had to describe to their spouse, like, here's the breakdown of the revenue. And here's the amount of money that's actually going in my account. And the amount of money that you're asking me for is literally like half of the amount of money that was going into his account. So like literally at the end of the day, if he would have paid her what she was asking for, it would have been half of his income. Mm-hmm. But if you look at it from a gross numbers perspective, as a non-business owner, you're like, that's easy. It's like 5%, 10%, whatever. But it's like half of his profit, half of the amount of money that he has to live. That's impossible.
And that's where businesses come into play in most of the cases that we work on. And we have to be very careful about this because there are some businesses out there that they're more of a hobby than a business.
Fair.
I mean, and it's like, there's really no value here. Let's just like look at like maybe an eBay business or some kind of side gig. No big deal. But we had a case, Josh, where because the business owner knew his business and because he understood the financials of his business, when it came time for tax time, his business was only generating $33,000 on the 2023 tax return. We don't have the 24.
Thank you for bringing it up that this can work in reverse as well.
This can work in reverse.
Yep.
$33,000 on the tax return. I looked at it. Our business evaluator looked at it and something didn't add up. So she went and did a deep dive on it. And guess how much that business was worth? $7 million.
And how much was he living on?
That's the other thing. There were a ton of expenses and whatnot being personal, personal expenses that were hidden by business.
That's my point. And I don't know the number, but that guy who's bringing in $33,000 a year could easily be living on $4,000 a year. So
and that was it. This Maserati, reverse, right? Maserati, vacations, sure. This, that, all this stuff. And we're like, something's not adding up. And sure enough, there's all these expenses and whatnot. There's these, and it's just, so it works in the other way. So if you own a business, and it goes back to my earlier comment, if you think you're going to try to be creative, you've got to be very careful because the optics of it, when you get in that courthouse and you get in front of that judge and he or she finds this out, they're not going to bode well for you.
Absolutely. Appreciate the fact that you're bringing this up, that you can't really get away with things anyway, because somebody's going to find it, especially if there's somebody good on the team that's looking for it. And can we just get out of the logical realm for a second, since we're guys and I know we get stuck there sometimes? Can we also just talk about our heart? Like, you guys, if you're listening to this right now, do you want to be that guy? Like, do you really want to be that guy? Do you want to be the guy who's hiding all the stuff from the spouse because you have bitterness and anger and resentment in your heart for whatever is happening, whether she did something or not? Who gives a fuck? Really? Like, are you really going to be that guy? So I'm just going to speak to that for a second, because I've done plenty of this in my life, in my marriage, in my divorce. And anyone that lives with bitterness, anger, resentment in their heart is drinking their own poison. And we always think, for whatever reason, our brain tricks us into thinking, oh, this is going to hurt somebody else. It just never does. It never hurts anyone else but yourself. So even if you did get away with it, is it worth it? Is it worth it to get away with it, to continue to drink your own poison? I guess that's all I wanted to say about that. Yeah. Jamie, do you have any comments on that?
No, I think it's right. I mean, and a lot of it goes back to what I said earlier too, the optics of it. You know, there's something to be said about the optics of your behaviors and the things that you're sharing with the kids, or there's things that you're saying and doing through the divorce proceedings. Like, I tell people all the time, like, you are now the CEO of your new life, and you've got to operate in just like the CEO of a business. You're very practical. You're very pragmatic. All of your communications are very professional, because the last thing you want to do is walk into that courtroom and have the other side throwing up on some screen for all the world to see, because the public can go into these courtrooms, the nasty text messages and the things that you're doing and the behaviors that you've had. Like, you don't want to have any of that stuff for anybody to see. There should be nothing you should just walk the line and do whatever you possibly can. And I'm the same way, man. I mean, there were things I look back on my divorce. I'm like, wow, I was not the best version of myself that day, or maybe even that week or that month, because it was exhausting. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if you can just not step in the same landmines that I did along the way, and that's what these conversations are all about, is helping people not do that, they're going to have a much better experience, right?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I'm the first to admit that I made plenty of mistakes. I failed a bunch of times. It's the reason that I originally started a podcast about failure, right? So like, I'm on board. I definitely have done those things. And I also feel very proud of myself, of how I dealt with my divorce in general. I made a lot of mistakes and definitely could have done things better, but in general, feel very proud about that. So much so that I remember the day when we were going through all the stuff, and I paid to get all the court recordings and all the court reporting notes and everything else, so that I have all of them. Mm-hmm. And here's what I would encourage anybody going through this process, especially if you have children. This is to the guys that have children. If you get every single word documented that was said during your entire divorce proceedings, whether it was in court, with a mediator, by yourself, through an email, a text, etc. Just imagine that there was a way that you could wave a magical wand, because you can. It's called technology. None of this stuff is hidden. It's like posting a picture on Facebook and thinking that it's not everywhere. It is. So you get all this stuff. Here's my question to you. This is what I would encourage you to do. If you got this huge stack of papers, and then you one day handed it to your children at an age-appropriate time, I'm not saying if they're 4, you hand them everything, right? But they're an adult. Let's say they're 25 years old. They come back around. They say, hey, what happened in your divorce? Would you feel comfortable handing that entire stack to them? Because if you wouldn't, then I would really reconsider how you're acting. Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be mistakes. Every single one of those stacks that we hand our kids is going to have a bunch of fuck ups in it, because we're human. Absolutely. But would you feel comfortable? Would you feel comfortable? Because if you would, great. You know that you're doing things right. And that's one of the things that really helped me going through my divorce, that I encourage guys with as well, is that it's not about you. Like, it's all about you, but it's not about you at the same time. If you give a shit about your kids at all, do it, so that if you handed that to your children, you'd be proud in general of what's in those papers.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Not agree more.
So let's do this. I know we got to wrap up here pretty soon, but what would you say are some, well, first of all, we haven't really talked about this much. How can guys get a hold of you? I mean, if a guy needs some financial help when he's going through his divorce, how can guys?
I think the easiest way is just through the website. The website is allegiantds.com. I'm sure you're going to put the link in the show notes.
Absolutely.
But it's Allegiant Divorce Solutions is our company, and that's where we do all of our financial planning for folks going through divorce. I am also a mediator. I started doing mediation work about 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago now. And that's been a great experience too, trying to help people navigate that divorce in an amicable way. way, which is frankly the way to do it if you can get it done. So we do mediation work as well. So all the information's on the website, but just go to the website. My cell phone number is on the website, so people can call me or text me directly.
Got it. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Is there anything else that you would say to guys going through this process right now that you want to encourage them with? Any big takeaways that maybe we haven't gone over yet, or things from your own divorce that you're like, man, I just really wish I would have known this, or I really just have a heart to tell guys about this right now?
We covered a ton, man. We covered a ton. And I think the to just hit it home and drive it home one more time is you can't be afraid to reach out for the help. There is a reason why 95% of our cases are women. Women going through a divorce. It's not because we've designed things that way. We don't advertise to just women. We didn't create a women-only Facebook group. We didn't create a women-only podcast. We didn't create a women-only website. None of that. Women go through this experience and they handle it differently, but they're also not afraid to reach out for help. They understand their shortfalls and they recognize, like, this is an area I could use some support in, so I'm going to make the investment.
What do you think is the mental reason for that?
My wife would say, my now wife,
because let's just say what it's not. It doesn't mean that like women are lesser in this area whatsoever. Knowledgeable, wisdom wise, or anything else. It's not that. So what is it? Why are women more likely to reach out than men? What do you think?
It has to be because they're just not afraid to ask for the help. They check their ego at the door. And I think that's the biggest difference. Even when we're hired by men, it is very challenging because every time you tell them, this may not go the way you think it's going to go, we got to be careful about this. What do you think about negotiating this way? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? They tend to have all the answers instead of just letting go and letting the professionals walk them through the experience. And I could see myself doing that. You know, if I had to go through this experience again and I didn't have the knowledge and the hands-on experience that I have today, I could see I would probably do the same thing. So you've got to check your ego at the door. You've got to recognize that it's okay to ask for help. We are here to help you. Josh and I are here to help you. I think we've done a pretty good job. I mean, I know we don't know each other super well, but I know enough about you, and hopefully you know enough about me at this point that I think we're kind of servants to the people that we serve.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
We are lead with a servant's mentality. That has always been who I am. I am just here to help. And how can I help you? How can our team get you through this?
You know, if I look at the last 20 years of my career, I've done a lot more free work than paid work, just in general, because I care about people and I want that. Because here's the alternative, Amy. The alternative is, especially that 35 to 50-year-old guy that is going through this. And it doesn't have to be that age, but let's just use that age for a second, that midlife age, right? This 35 to 50-year-old guy is going through this. He's going through this divorce. He doesn't feel like he can ask for help for whatever reason, societal reasons, family reasons, whatever. He feels like he's just got to go be a cowboy and do everything by himself, which is a stupid analogy, but I don't even know who made that analogy, because every cowboy had other cowboys helping them. So it's fucking stupid. But he feels like he just has to do all this stuff himself, and then it weighs him down. And we already talked about how insane divorce is and how shitty you feel all the time. And then you feel really terrible about this. And then all of a sudden you freak out and you have a midlife crisis. Or you go and you just sleep with a bunch of women, or you go buy a bunch of fancy cars, or you go just blow all your money, or you go just decide not to be in your kid's life anymore. Or, God forbid, high suicide rate, 35 to 50-year-old males. You just decide it's not worth it anymore. And it's just I have such a passion for this age group. I'm in this age group because I just don't understand. Like, if you need help with other things, guys can reach out. So just reach out. It doesn't mean that you're lesser of a man. It actually means you're more of a man if you can reach out. For me, if I look at a man where I'm like, that guy is a man, that guy is a masculine, strong, wise man that I respect and look up to, the only people that fit that category are the ones that realize what they're good at, what they need help with, and how they can improve. That's it.
I couldn't have said it better myself. You know, it's, as you were talking about the Cowboys, I mean, I always think of the Western Cowboys, right? Like the
John
1800s Cowboys, right? And I'm thinking, as you were saying that, I'm thinking like, how many sober cowboys were there? Right? And there's a reason for it. It's because being a cowboy is rough.
Right.
right?
Especially the ones that are by themselves. Yeah.
How
The
many
ones that are out
cowboys?
there.
Yeah. How many cowboys are super fit and living to the age of 95? Not many of them, because life is rough for a cowboy.
Absolutely. And you can still be a cowboy and still get help and actually here's the other thing. Just to go to men's logical, efficient brains for a second. It's more efficient to get help also.
Yeah.
This is not like, oh, let's just get help because we need it and because I'm lesser than. No. It's more efficient. Like if I could go back in time and redo my divorce, I would have obviously a divorce coach. I might even have another category that I've never heard of, and that's like a divorce manager or something, like just somebody to manage all the other people so I didn't have to. Because the amount of time and mental capacity and everything else, besides the fact of all the money and everything else that got spent on the divorce and got lost in the divorce and got all the expenses, etc. The biggest thing for me was lack of income because of all the capacity it took from my soul.
Yeah. It's you have to make the investment.
Absolutely.
Well,
man, I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing part of your story as well. And again, just as a reminder, go reach out to Jamie. Go to his website. It'll be in the show notes, allegiantds.com. All right, you guys, until next time, we'll see you later, you derelicts.